July 22nd, 2023 marked 100th birth anniversary of playback singer Mukesh and Dr. It also marked 100th anniversary, or I should say birthday, of one of my mentors and colleague, Dr. Leone. The difference is that Mukesh ji, who entered my heart and soul when I was much younger as a singer, and who almost entered at a time in my life when I was in search of a father, because I had lost my father. Passed away when I was 7 years of age, and Mukesh ji, through his voice, has given me comfort all these years. I became a singer. I sang mostly his songs all my adult life, and during COVID time, when his was about 96th birthday, 97th birthday or so, I took upon myself to record. I got into music videos and decided to record 100 of Mukesh's songs. Well, fast forward, Mukesh ji would be 101 years old if he were alive, and I may have reached my target about 75 songs, but now I'm hoping to get those 100 songs recorded by August 27th, which still is almost like his 49th year since he passed away on August 27th in 1976. A big shock to the world, big shock for the music industry. Raj Kapoor actually went on to say, "I lost my voice." But Mukesh was a voice for many other actors, and I've continued to sing his songs most of my adult life. But today, July 22nd, 2024, marks 101 years of Mukesh's birth anniversary. And I want to introduce to you another person who came into my life, who was also born on July 22nd, 1923, 101 years ago. Well, it turned out last year I was part of his 100th birthday celebration. Dr. Leone has had a great life, and he's so grateful for what he has done. What's remarkable about this man who came in my life first, I came as a resident for interview, and he was the reason I joined the Academic Medical Center, Brown University, and the affiliated hospital, Rhode Island Hospital, where he was the director of the cancer center. And the very first day, he told me I should call him by his first name, Lou. I had a hard time with that, because for one thing, he was so much older. He was almost like a fatherly figure to me. But he insisted, and eventually it took 2-3 years, but Dr. Leone became Lou, and we went on to become colleagues. He still remained my mentor and a friend. I learned so much from him over the years. And when COVID hit, he was about 97 years of age. I would periodically call him how he was doing. And even then, he was still cooking for himself, doing gardening for about an hour or two, walked about a couple miles. Very sharp, voracious reader, always talked about the books he liked to read, and a sharp mind, still had his own teeth, good hearing. And when I went for his 100th birthday, about 3 hours away from my house, he had moved closer to his daughter. I was amazed how many stories that we had enjoyed together. He was still remained fresh in his mind. One of the stories was, we used to go to the Naval Hospital as consultants, and he drove a 1952 Cougar. And it's ironic that I would have to tell him to slow down. He would sometimes gas it 80-90 miles an hour, and I had to tell him to slow down. Kind of irony, much younger, but he loved his sports car. And on his 100th birthday, he told a story about how he was driving on Wampanoag Trail going to the hospital, and at a signal, a young lady driving a Camaro, a new sports car that General Motors made, looked at Dr. Leone with almost like a mean-spirited look, because apparently Dr. Leone had crossed her, overtaken her. So when the green light came, she gassed her car and had a smirk on her face and went past Dr. Leone, only to see that Dr. Leone would gas the car 90 miles an hour and go past her, and almost reminded me that the song Another One Bites the Dust should have been played at that time. But that was just one of many stories. And when I asked, not a generic question of what's the secret of his longevity, he always was thin-framed man, and he remained thin all his life. So obviously the diseases that are tied to obesity were kind of almost off limits for him, no blood pressure, diabetes, heart condition. But his mind was sharp, and I never saw him in many years of my relationship with him, professional, never saw him get upset or angry. And when I asked him, do you think that contributed to his good health? And he's honestly and humbly said, I really don't know the answer to that question, Prakash. And it was so good when I talked to him yesterday. He went on to again talk for a long time about the books he's reading. And he was reading a book by Bob Woodward on longevity. So sarcastically I said to Dr. Leone, but I still call him Dr. Leone, that I hope I'm around to celebrate his 115th birthday. Why that landmark? Because it's, to the best of my knowledge, the longest living man was a British soldier who made it up to 114 years of age, I believe. Of course, the longest living woman made it up to 124 in the 70s. It was a French woman. Men don't live as long as women do, but the other story I told Dr. Leone, the governor of Rhode Island, the smallest state in America, holds a centenarian breakfast. I hope I'm saying it right. So he throws a breakfast for all those people who made it to 100 years. And one of my patients told me about that. And when I asked that patient how many people were there, and she said about 20 or so. But that doesn't mean that's how many were living. Of course, many were living but didn't come, and others were probably not well enough. And when I told that story to another patient who was 103 years old, she said, darn it, doctor, I missed 3 birthday parties. I'm going next year. So I said to Dr. Leone, would he come back to Rhode Island to attend that brunch? And he said, I don't know. And when I asked him, what do you mean, I don't know? I expected him to say, who knows whether I'm going to be around or not. But that's not what he said. He said, I don't want any celebration, Prakash. I'm happy I'm living one day at a time. And, even as a widower, he and his wife, Virginia, were married for, I think, something like 65 or 70 years. Dr. Leone practiced medicine until he was 90 years of age. And even until the COVID hit, 97 or so, he would go attend a tumor conference at a local hospital to not only keep his mind fresh, but to educate younger doctors. And educate he did. I was shocked when he told an interesting story that when he got into, the word oncology didn't exist. They called it a tumor clinic. There was no chemotherapy. Nitrogen mustard had just been started being used in a clinic because it had some anti-tumor activity. But the most fascinating story he told me was in college he contracted tuberculosis. And antibiotics were not developed back then. He didn't want to say, Prakash, you don't know how old I am. Of course, he had been through, it was just after he was born, just after World War I. But he said, so how did what happened to the TB? Well, they took a lung x-ray, they saw the cavity. And the TB bacteria doesn't like oxygen, and it doesn't like cold weather. It survives on hot, humid weather. So he was brought to a sanatorium where it was freezing cold, and he just rested. And the bug died, and he was cured of tuberculosis without any medication. And of course, there is some scar tissue left in his lung where there was TB, but goes to show the will and power in the mind can conquer all kinds of obstacles. And obviously, and then he talked about how so many presidents were shot. I asked Dr. Leone a very interesting question. Who was the first president he voted for, U.S. president? And he remembered Herbert Hoover. This was, I believe, before FDR. So he has voted in 41 or 42 presidential elections. And of course, he has his favorites. FDR was, of course, very popular after World War II. Doesn't matter he was a Democrat or a Republican. But overall, when I asked him who was his most favorite president, and he said, any day, Harry Truman, because he was a simple man who lived a simple life. And he could relate to American people. It was interesting to hear his personal stories. And last story I would like to finish up with is growing up in the Italian neighborhood of Boston. Red Sox, the team Red Sox, of course, one of the oldest teams in a baseball team in America. And who would not remember the Fenway Park? In America, when it comes to baseball, Wrigley Field in Chicago and Fenway Park are the most popular. But he didn't have money. It was $1 to buy a ticket, and he didn't have that money. So he would watch the game through a tiny hole in the fence, and when the security guards would come, he would run away only to come back again and watch the game. And whatever little money he had, he'd rather eat a hot dog or whatever. And so when I asked him, did he ever attend live games? Yeah, eventually when he became a doctor, he did see many of the famous players of the times, and I believe he saw Babe Ruth and Ted Williams and some of the big names, but a Yankee all the way, and what a pleasure it has been to have known Dr. Leone all these years, and I'm hoping to, unfortunately this weekend I could not go see him on his birthday, but hope to drive to see him next weekend, and wish him all the best. And I have to say one more thing. When he turned 97 during COVID, it was the first time I told him how I could never call his first name, and I told him, why did you have difficulty? And I told him that I had lost my father when I was 7 years of age, and he had filled in my father's void in many more than one ways. And he became so emotional, and because he has two daughters, and he said, Prakash, I wish I had known I had a son. And then I was emotional myself. Then I said, yeah, I guess so, a brown son to a green-eyed Italian father, I guess. But he knew where I was coming from. It's the same feeling I had about our playback singer Mukesh. And I feel so blessed that these two men who came in my life and took at least they tried to give me a fatherly advice and fatherly protection in some ways. Mukesh ji to main unko mila nahi, I didn't see him, but his songs provided all the comfort that I needed the most at a time when I was struggling with not having a father, and I still do many years later. And his voice and his songs have given me that comfort. So for now, I would just say to myself, every time I see Dr. Leone, I would feel that I'm meeting my favorite playback singer, Mukesh and Dr.